Rodolph, try now to share your screen. You can see the green button.
You need to make him co-host. And so you need to do me.
I'm trying to content from.
Do you see? So do you see a little button at the bottom of the screen in green that says share screen?
Yeah, I know this one. So I click it and then I get all kind of Microsoft SharePoint, Google Drive.
So you just have to have your presentation open in your computer.
Yeah, it's open. Slides.
And then if you have it on the screen, you open a panel that says your desktop, and you would open. There you go.
Yeah, as usual, it's not as I thought it would be simpler, but it's okay. Not. I'm working on it.
That's all right. That's all right. I'll just follow the steps with you. So if you just click on share screen, then you would be open into a panel.
Yeah.
And there should appear all your different windows that you have open on your screen at the moment.
Unfortunately, that's not the case.
That's not the case.
So no, I know what you mean, but it's not the case. And no, for some reason, I don't understand why this thing is blocked. Zoom.
What does it appear once you click on share screen? So you click on that button, and what does it appear? So just I'll be able to tell you how you could move forward.
This will stop our screen sharing.
Yeah, just press continue. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Just press continue and then. Ooh.
And now I need to find my presentation.
And then can you see all your windows open in there? Can you see all your different windows of your computer? Or you just see a whiteboard?
Well, I see kind of like a box which says basic, advanced, and files. And then I'm trying now to open this, although my presentation is already open. I don't understand why.
So let's.
Okay, something is happening here.
Yeah, okay, so you're starting to share something. Nothing is coming up yet. There you go.
It's loading.
There you go. Now I can see it perfectly. Now I can see the first slide.
Okay, good.
So yeah, that's basically, yeah, perfect. And I can see you moving. Yeah. Perfect. Just make sure not to, you can take it out of the screen now, but just make sure not to close that window on your computer, and you will be ready to go in just about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. Avi, I will start the webinar and he will give you the word.
Okay.
Sounds good to you?
Okay.
Perfect.
So I'll unshare now.
Yeah. Just yeah, you're
Stop
still
sharing. Okay. Good.
You're still sharing. So
yeah, just a second.
Can you, yeah, there you go. Perfect. You're good to go. Yeah, just bear with us a couple more minutes online and you'll be on live sharing in 10-15 minutes.
So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the fourth and last day of our seminar for the Israeli plastic industry on plastic recycling and use of recycled plastic. We learned a lot in the last 3 days. They've been very intense. We learned a lot about sorting, recycling, about solutions from Europe, about various sectors, agriculture, packaging, of course, other industrial sectors. And today we are dedicating a day for policy making. So the main target audience are decision makers and policy makers on plastics. But of course, in industry and the general public have been invited and are welcome also to hear these discussions. So today we're going to talk about how can policy promote plastic recycling. So we will talk about deposit return systems and EPRs, and how to incentivize the various players on the value chain. We're going to talk about even about cities. How can cities promote zero waste or promote plastic recycling? And to start us off, I want to invite another esteemed member of our consortium and a good colleague, Professor Dr. Rudolf Guckmanns. He's the director of the Plastic Innovation Competence Center at Freiburg in Switzerland, and it's been, as I said, a member of our consortium and part of the recommendations that we developed under this UNIDO funded project. And we asked Rudy to talk to us about the deposit return systems, the past and the future. Rudy, if you are ready, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
You can share your presentation.
I hope I can manage to share my presentation. So
yeah, in case not, we can do it from our side.
No, it's fine. I should be able to get there. Just a second. Okay.
Yes, starting to work.
Yeah, I think you should be able to see this now.
We do.
Okay, so first of all, again, thank you for the invite to give a short presentation about a challenging topic, namely deposit return systems. And we call it past, present, and future, because deposit return systems are not necessarily something that we invented today or going to invent in the future, but maybe we want to reinvent it. And the key of this approach is essentially how can we engage all the citizens in this effort to do a better recycling. Maybe just a short introduction of myself. You see my picture here. I'm, as already mentioned, director of the Plastics Innovation Center, and my background is that I've been working as a research fellow for the Dow Chemical Company for 34 years, and before that I was doing my work as a PhD with Exxon Mobil, and we just published a book on eco-design, which I would say I can recommend because it's kind of like an overview of the state of play that we have at the moment in the context of recycling and sustainability in the general sense on materials, including plastics. So what do we do essentially? I believe that if we really want to address the challenges of plastic packaging and sustainability in that context, we need to rethink how we do things. And that means we need to develop a system approach. And that means also we need to bring different disciplines and different actors of the value chain, but also different disciplines in terms of technology, in terms of social sciences, and in terms of businesses together. And that will be essentially the future for such deposit refund or return systems. In other words, how can we make sure that the materials that we have so painstakingly developed with so much money that we have invested are not going to be wasted? So if we really want to do and have sustainable solutions for the future, not only in the context of the climate change, but also in the context of let's do a much more economically meaningful activity by preserving materials, then we need to do a transdisciplinary approach. Typically, when we talk about plastics recycling and sustainability, immediately people come up with circularity and they draw a circle. And actually, I've also drawn a circle here. This is actually a picture of a value chain for plastic packaging systems that was developed in actually in more than 10 years ago. And you see that, and you probably don't see all the details, but that's not the point. The point is that a circle or a real value chain is not just a circle. It's an interaction of many circles, and in other words, many loops and many links. It's a very complex system of interacting actors that all contribute to eventually end up with making packaging, with making food that is being packaged, and eventually also that deal with what we don't want after use anymore. So we need to start thinking in terms of a system, and we need to start thinking in terms of a complex system. It's not complicated, it's complex. And this is a very different approach. So if we apply this to recycling, and I also use this typical small picture here, when we talk about recycling, and simplistically speaking, then there are about a number of steps that you typically need to think of. But the most important part, which is often forgotten, is you need to start at the beginning in the product design. In other words, in this case, the plastic design. What is the functional use that I want to obtain, and how can I already think about reusing it, recycling it? So how do I need to do this? 80% of the product design of the activity defines how, so the product design defines 80% of the success of reuse and recyclability of materials. So typically when you make a product and it's packaged, then you basically sell it, typically at retailers. We as consumers, everybody is essentially a consumer. We then use the product, and then we are stuck with the packaging. So there are a number of options what you can do, and different countries have different options. So you can sort it yourself. There are options where you have multiple boxes, and I'll come to that again, where you already do a pre-sorting as a consumer at home, for example. Or you can just leave the collection to an organization, typically a publicly funded organization from our taxpayers' money, as I say, that does the sorting and also does the cleaning, and eventually processes this entire stuff to end up with a new material feedstock or a chemical feedstock. The big challenges are, simplistically put, I would say two. One is this, what is known as the circularity gap. That means the moment a product ends up in the hands of a consumer, nobody really knows anymore where this product, and certainly the packaging, is going to end up. So it's kind of like a black hole. So in order to get this product back, we need to rely on the goodwill of consumers to get it back. And the question therefore is, how can you incentivize everybody as consumer to do a better job than we do today? The second thing is, which is more an economic element, is that we deal with value destruction. The moment we consider a plastic bottle or whatever packaging as a waste, then, and in other words, we don't value it anymore, then we basically throw away all the money that has been invested, even if per individual item this money can be very, very little. It is still value, and this is something that we need to preserve. So I hope this is going to work, because I had a video, and if it doesn't work, then you will need to watch it, but I can tell you what the video is about. And apparently it seems that it doesn't work. So But anyway, you have the YouTube address. I would recommend you to look at it. It's a relatively simple activity that was put together. So there are a number of people that come to a big square, and they dump plastic bottles and tin cans, and then they put a sign that says gratis, free, you can take it with you. So obviously the response of all the passers-by is they just leave it there. So nobody picks up anything. It stays there, let's say forever, so to speak. Nobody is interested in somebody else's garbage. So they then repeat this experiment, but then instead of having so exactly the same surroundings, then they put a sign there which also says free to take with you, and then they put a small sign with it that says 25 cents per bottle. And the result is that in less than half an hour, everything has been picked up by all kinds of people. In other words, the message there is this simple social experiment shows that money incentivizes certainly to pick up somebody else's garbage. So what is a deposit return system or refund system? Is essentially a system where when consumers buy a product, they pay, and this is also important to notice, that it's the consumer that pays an additional amount of money, kind of like a deposit, that will be reimbursed upon return of the packaging or product to a certain collection point. And these collection points are now in all kinds of shapes and forms. They can be automated, and you can get a ticket. They are in different places, public places, or in retailer stores and so on. It depends a little bit on the country that you're in, for which system they have been chosen. So this is also another element, and still a challenge, is the standardization of this approach, because packaging is kind of like a global product. If you buy something in, let's say, Sweden, or if you buy something in Spain, then, or even if you buy something in Israel, the product is probably packaged in the same way, maybe with some different labels, in order to protect the food that you're interested in. But there is no real standardization of how best to do this. And if you want to bring all these small pieces together, this may be a suggestion. If we talk about this DRS system, so then you will see that this system is already implemented in many places, so about 40 regions. Not all countries, even in the same country, have it all implemented, but there is more and more interest to implement this. Just to give you the picture of the United States, you see that California has a deposit system, but the rest of the US mostly not. Michigan also has one, but the rest has none. So it's not everybody is convinced that this is going to work, and it is certainly an economic incentive, but there are more and more people that are being convinced, and certainly policy can and must support this, because the results in these 14 regions speak for themselves. For example, in Europe, on average, more than 90% of the packaging that is being let's say that has a deposit is returned, so the collection has significantly increased, and I'll demonstrate that in a few other examples. So at the moment, as I already mentioned, there are many different systems to collect the plastic packaging waste. So you can do it at your home. For example, in Switzerland, there is only one bag, and everybody dumps everything in it except for paper and glass and PET bottles. But there is also systems like in Sweden, where they have developed a very simple system with 7 colors. I mean, you only see 6. The 7th one is actually a white one. So these 7 colors are essentially also indicated on the product. So you can say a product with a red dot will go into the red bag. And this enables people to kind of separate and collect in a better way, and therefore increase the recycling rate. There are also communal activities where you have seen many public or private boxes. In this case, the example of a PET bottle, which you will find anywhere. These boxes, these bins can be smart, or they can be just a bag available, or you can go to this recycling center. This is at the moment typically standard. And when we talk about DRS, we talk about typically bottles or something that is relatively easy to identify and also to bring back. But that doesn't mean that it's not applicable to many packaging kinds. So I've also, because this is always the question that comes up, what about the money? So there are many ways and different ways to develop a DRS system. Typically, the consumer is not necessarily aware, as you can see on the right hand side or the left hand side in the picture here. The consumer is not really aware. They typically pay the deposit and they will get it back, the deposit, when they return the object. So there is all kind of activities in relation to how the retailer interacts with the people that have produced the product, and who will eventually collect it and deal with the money. How does this money flow goes? So in Estonia, the example is that there is a centralized system that will handle this, either private or a public organization that will deal with this as an intermediary to eventually get the products for recycling. In Germany, it works somewhat differently because the retailers are responsible for that, for the interactions with the producers and the importers themselves, and in order to eventually get it to let's say the recycling activity, the collection and recycling activity. So typically when we talk about the DRS, there are still many people that argue that against the use of DRS, because it is a very expensive system. These are typically their arguments. It doesn't reduce littering, and we just want one system. I don't want 5 different systems for every single product. I just want one system. And some people even believe that it's old-fashioned. And yes, it was an approach that was very much popular at one time. But in the countries where they have implemented it, they actually, and there has been now studies in detail that have found out that it is certainly, it's costing money, but it is much less expensive than when you don't have a DRS system for various reasons. So you also have much less littering. Littering, to avoid all littering, and 100% return is probably the ultimate. But certainly there is still some littering. Nobody will deny this, but it's certainly much less. There is also a proven track record that it enhances collections, as already mentioned in Europe, typically more than 90%. So DRS is not limited to bottles. It can be applied to many other things, basically any packaging. And the new thing is that digitalization offers also the possibility to develop new business models, and I will give you one example, and I think you will hear more on this later on. But it certainly enables certainly for Europe to get to the targets that have been set certainly for plastic packaging, to get to more than 50% and more than 60% recycle, where we are still at the moment not there. And obviously, if you have more collection and more opportunity of clean streams, then you will also reduce the emissions and conserve the materials much longer, which means
Rudy,
less energy and so on.
I just wanted to intervene to say that we have 3 more minutes.
Okay, I'm almost done. The key thing here is that we need to rethink a little bit about the taxations. How do we deal with the money? And the money is essentially typically a taxation that we deposit is seen as a tax. We should actually see it as a rebate, and we can do that by combining, by changing how the money flows. And how the money flows, I mean, this is a bit of a complex system, but instead of basically consumers to pay something, we should also have, for example, the retailers pay something in replacement of the current loyalty cards and so on. And then you can develop a system using digital virtual coins, for example, that enables the consumers to contribute and to participate also in this recycling stream through these rewards of virtual coins. I did have, so how does that work? We have a system developed where you can scan with your iPhone what you buy, you dump it back into a bin that is associated with this system, and then you will get a reward, and this reward you can spend in different places. At the moment, there is a pilot running in Fribourg to demonstrate that this works, and we have multiple, let's say, companies that participate into accepting the recycled coins. To give you an example how much value we destroy in just for the PET bottle in Switzerland, after 30 years, Switzerland only collects 83%. You can say this is great, but it still means that 8,000 tons of PET are being burned or being thrown away somewhere. If you would value this for 1 or 10 cents, then you will see that you talk about 160 million francs per year. We throw away 27 million francs per year. I think this is a substantial amount of money that could be used for something else. So closing the DRS system, I think it's clear that the existing systems have proven that it is a workable system. Consumers are willing to participate. The mentality is also changing, but there are new ways to do this and how to reward the system if you rethink how the money is going to be flowing. And we don't always have to think in terms of taxations, because this is at the moment one of the bigger challenges, that people believe that DRS is a tax. It doesn't have to be a tax. It's a contribution, and it's part of the, let's say, the value chain that you can develop in a very different way. So with this, I want to thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much, Rudy. We are out of time. I did want to ask you quickly, but we don't have time, if DRS can be applied also to other materials or products except packaging, agricultural waste, for example, agricultural plastic waste. But we don't have time, unfortunately, for that. This is an interesting topic. So thanks, Rudy, for this presentation. And I hope we can apply some of the recommendations that we put into our reports into actual work.
Thank you. It's actually been used for drapes also.
Pardon again?
It's also for the drapes being used, for example. It's like textiles.
Great. Okay. Textiles. Perfect. Thanks, Rudy. And we go ahead to our next presentation on EPRs, and especially the eco-modulation of the EPRs. And we have with us Joachim Woden. He's the managing director of EXPRA, which is the International EPR Alliance. Actually, Joachim, I thought this was just European, but then I saw that Canada is also a member. So
yeah, and Israel,
of course.
Israel is a member as well, of course. Huh?
True, but we consider ourselves European for some reason.
Oh, sorry.
Perfect. Good morning, Joachim.
The first mistake already in the morning. Yeah?
No, it's actually mine. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm jumping immediately into the topic if you agree, but of course it is quite difficult for me just to speak about fee modulation after presentation, not a presentation, a promotion of a deposit system. I would have to say a lot about this presentation, but I'm seeing that in the end of this morning you have a presentation from FOS Plus, my Belgian member, and it is not as black and white, I have to say. Nothing against you, dear professor, I'm sorry, but it is much more gray and interesting, the discussion. And FOS Plus shows how you can collect in the same amount as a deposit system via a normal EPR system. And that's a problem as well, a little bit, because in Switzerland, up to now, we do not have an EPR system. So I would like to invite the professor to come to other countries and see how it works without a tax. But with a fee that industry is paying to close the financial gap. And that is the job of the EPR organizations, to keep this circle running. And as we all know from cycling, as rounder the circle is, as smoother the journey is. And this is the job of a PRO, to ensure that all the various participants in these circles are doing their job in the best way, of course, including the collectors, the sorters, and the recyclers. And as we rightly heard, there's a financial gap for the collection, sorting, and partly even for the recycling of the packaging that has to be closed, because otherwise it will not happen. And that's where a PRO is collecting the money, usually from the brand owners, the fillers, the bottlers, and pass it on to municipalities, to collectors, sorters, and for some packaging, even to recyclers, not for PET bottles. We heard that they have a value in itself, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the virgin oil prices, usually. But at the moment, for example, for flexible film, there is a need very often to pay some subsidies to the recyclers as well. But as we decided to make packaging circular within the next years, I think this is an investment in the future, and hopefully, if we develop our systems, our circles more and more, even flexible film will have a good value in the future. Before we come to fee modulation, of course, it is important to understand how you usually set a fee for a packaging. And as I said, we are collecting money from the brand owners and pass it to the collectors, sorters, and recyclers to close the financial gap. But of course, every kind of packaging, every packaging material has its own specific cost. So you as a PRO, you know from the regulator what you will have to collect, where you will have to fulfill the recycling targets. You should understand how much you need to collect. And in the meantime, I think our approach changed so that we are trying not to collect just a certain target. We are trying to collect as much as possible to make packaging more and more circular. And if you know whom you have to deliver, so whom you have to provide with an infrastructure, for example, all our households, you are trying to understand the costs for the collection, the sorting, and the recycling, going down by the fee material. That was the start of all our systems, and then you can start to calculate what you need from each material to fulfill all the services that you have to pay. Of course, on top, you have to do promotion and education programs, usually some research and development, in many countries, you have to pay for the enforcement as well. And of course, you have to pay for your administration, for your office, for your staff, and so on. And all these costs together, you are dividing to the different packaging materials, and then, of course, to the packaging that is reported to your system. So your companies becoming a member of the system, they put X packaging on the market, and this is taken as a divider to understand in the end the money per kilo or per ton that industry has to pay to cover all the costs for the management. And of course, we have to be as neutral as possible. We have we are not the ones who decide whether a packaging is good or bad. We just have to pass the costs per material from one side to the other. And that is why it is extremely important to involve obliged industry so that they understand, and the material industry as well, so that they know why plastics pays usually more than glass and so on, so that no one feels discriminated and is discriminated. So a lot of transparency is needed, of course, always in line with antitrust regulation, and you need a lot of data to understand what are the more or less exact costs per material. But this was the start, and in the meantime, we said, or the legislator said, but in industry fully agrees with it, we have to go one step further. So we have to differentiate within each material, because within each material, you find a lot of different stuff, like the PET bottles, if they are staying in an EPR system, like in paper, whether you have pure paper or coated paper, all this has different costs. Again, we do not judge whether a packaging is good or bad. We are just trying to pass the right and fair costs to each of the submaterials. This is now in the European Union an obligation that we have to modulate the fees for packaging, especially with regard to their recyclability. And that's what we are trying to do now, again, taking into account the real costs. So if you think that you need a lot of data to understand the costs for plastics, of course, you need to multiply data to understand what are the differences in the costs for PET, and even for PET bottles, you have different costs for clear PET bottle or opaque PET bottles, with bottles where the sleeve is bigger and so on. So you can go a lot more into detail, and later on in FOSS Plus you can probably see how they did it and why they did it. Again, if you want an acceptance within industry and within the public, you have to have a lot of transparency why you are doing it, how you are doing it, because otherwise people start to think that you want to promote a certain packaging or to punish a certain packaging. But again, this is not the job of a producer responsibility system. We are a neutral organization serving the needs of industry, and that's why we are using a transparent and fair criteria to modulate. This is relatively easy. If you have a single service provider, it becomes more difficult, much more difficult if you have competing PROs. And we have seen in Germany the example that all the 10 competing PROs agreed to a proposal that the fee modulation should be taken out of competition and passed to a central fund, which is fed by all packaging put on the market, and which is then rewarding those packaging which are easier to recycle. Let's see whether the legislator will take this proposal up and put it into legislation. But I think this is an interesting learning that fee modulation in the end has to be done centrally, because otherwise, if you do it in competition, you cannot compete on the environment somehow. So this is difficult, and that is one of the learnings, for example, in Germany. At the moment, we are obliged to modulate with regard to recyclability, but of course you can in the future use other criteria as well. Some countries are discussing and thinking about to reward recycled content, which is more difficult because it has nothing to do with the costs. So then you would go away from a pure cost-based modulation to additional incentive-based modulation, where you have to be, again, more transparent to be fair and not influence the market in an unfair way. So you see, that's I already put here, and probably you get some more info later from FOSS Plus. FOSS Plus has a very detailed approach, trying to differentiate between the main streams that they are sorting out. And this is one important criteria for many systems. They have a look, what are they sorting out at the sorting center? So after collection, it is brought to a sorting center. What are they sorting out there, and what are the costs of each of these fractions? As you can quite easily understand the various costs of this, and you can see here quite clearly the difference between a clear PET bottle costs 10 cents per kilo next year, compared to a flexible film. Oh, I cannot see this now in my flexible film with more than €1 per kilo. So you see that that films have a totally different cost structure as PET bottles. In the Netherlands, they have started 2 years ago now with a more simple approach. They just differentiate between, for example, for plastics, for all plastics that are easy to recycle and the plastics which are difficult to recycle or not able to recycle at the moment. So a quite simple approach, so easy to administer. And the cost difference between the two rates is already €260 per ton, which is, of course, I would say, quite incentive to try to go from the non-recyclable level to the recyclable level. The Italian friends, they have started already three years ago, and in the meantime, as you can see, they have 4 different levels for plastic fee, depending also whether it comes from household packaging or commercial packaging, and depending somehow in 3 levels how they are able to recycle it. And they differentiate really on the reality. Is there a real happening collection, sorting, and recycling for a certain packaging, or in the worst level is especially the recycling and sorting still at the start? Still there has to be a lot to invent to make the circularity happen. And the cost difference here, as you can see, is even higher than in the Netherlands. It's around €450 per ton. So this is, of course, motivating people to go from one level to the next one. And of course, this is even incentivized or strongly incentivized from the legislative level in Europe, because as it seems from 2030, we will only be allowed to put recyclable packaging on the market. And recycling, not meaning that you have one professor with one lab who is able to recycle one packaging, but that there is in reality a real collection, sorting, and recycling stream for this packaging. At the moment in Europe, in the 27 European member states, many countries still have not implemented the new legislation. So there is no fee modulation taking place. I would say in around a third of the countries, we see now some fee modulation. Although it is done different from country to country, you can see that the same packaging is in the best level and the same packaging is in the worst level at the moment. But of course, we concentrated in the first years of EPR to reach a target on those packaging which is easier to recycle. So in many countries, the sorting and the recycling of flexibles still has to go some way. But here I can say that especially the value chain for flexible packaging is doing a lot to change this and to make as much flexible packaging recyclable. So if you are interested, Google C-Flex, and I think you will find a lot of information. Implementation in countries with a competitive EPR system, as I said, this is still a challenge. Let's see whether the German model will fly and perhaps other countries will copy this. At the moment, it is more applied in single service PRO countries, and here already we can learn a lot from these first experiences. And I would like to close with our motto, because this is always the most important thing. You cannot do this alone. You cannot, as a PRO in our EPR system, you cannot sit in your office and decide something. You always have to take your stakeholders with you, to involve them, to be as inclusive as possible, because only if we all understand it, if we all support it, then it will really happen. And this brings me to close it to the video in the first presentation we didn't see. This is horrible, and this is the situation we have to change, that people only act in a good way if they are paid for. This is for me, this is a logical mistake in our approach. We should act because it makes sense, whether we get money or we get no money. We should act in any way, and that's I think there is a good step now in many countries, like in Belgium, like in Spain, like in Austria, where people are rewarded for good acting, not by money, but by social points, by tickets for the train and so on, with all these digital possibilities. So I think the future is not just a very complex DRS system, but these high-level new and sexy systems where you get a reward if you do the right thing. Thanks a lot, dear Avi, and I wish the rest of the day big success as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Joachim. We're not letting you go yet. We have a couple of questions if you have time.
Yes, please.
So we had actually, funnily, the same question from both ministries here in Israel, asking about the update mechanism of the eco-modulation fees in case there are new technologies that are added to the market. Who is responsible for updating them? How is it updated? And actually, who is responsible for managing the fees and managing the fees and updating them? So that's one question. The other question is there a way to show the consumer what the EPR fees were? Example is like the VAT that is shown on the purchasing receipt. Is there any system that you know that displays this information to the consumer?
Yeah. So who is responsible? EPR system, extended producer responsibility. So putting the responsibility for the end of life management of a packaging of a product to those producing the product, to the brand owners. So this is private. And these brand owners decide to found a self-help tool, the producer responsibility organization, to fulfill the obligations on their behalf. And then the PRO, owned by industry, is fulfilling the obligations and collecting the necessary money, and then of course deciding about the fees. And usually you have industry in the board. Very often you even have special fee committees where industry is sitting in, so that industry who is paying, they are deciding about the necessary amount of money. And that's a different to a tax. It is not the legislator, the government, who is deciding about the tax, and so the fee setting is also much more flexible. So usually the fees are set once a year. So in the usual term, you have once a year the opportunity to adapt the fees, to take into account innovation, new packaging, and so on. But of course, if it is necessary, because there's a disruption of the market, you can even within a year adopt the fees without a parliament process and so on. So this is industry run, and so industry is I think more flexible, and we ensure that the money which is collected is really used for the purpose and not being used for other purposes, because if it is a tax, it goes into the state budget and you never know where it is ending up. The second question was, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting.
The second question was on how to display to the consumer the price of the.
Yeah. Usually the EPR fees are not shown to the inhabitants, because in the end they are individually because of the packaging of a company. And if your packaging of a company is lighter or different structured than the one of your competitor, you pay a different fee, of course. So it is usually not in the interest of the company to show what they pay, because then the competitor would know how much they pay. So they pay the same general price, of course, but if your packaging is different from your competitor, of course you pay a different price. And this is part of the competitive business. You also do not show how much you pay for your energy or for your stuff and so on. So, and that's the idea, to integrate the end of life cost into the selling price, to make it internalization of external costs, as economic people say. So that's why per logic you do not show it. There are some countries with the fees for we. They are showing the we fee on the bill, but there the costs, the fee is the same for any washing machine, whether you have an easy repairable, recyclable washing machine or not.
Understood.
So
understood.
Yeah.
Great. Understood. Thanks a lot for these answers. There's actually another question that we don't have time to answer, but Pedro, if you would like to send it in the chat, and if
yes,
Joachim
I
has
will
time
have a
to
look
answer
to the chat. Yeah.
Wonderful. It's about
okay.
the biodegradable materials.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Thanks, Joachim.
Bye. Bye.
We move ahead to our last presentation before the break, and that's from Miguel Ángel Goriz Peris. He's a project specialist at ITENE, that's the Spanish Technological Institute of Packaging, Transportation and Logistics. And they have been involved with a Horizon project on incentivizing citizen behavior. And we asked Miguel Ángel to share with us some of the knowledge and findings that they have on the topic of involving citizens through incentives. Miguel Ángel, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I proceed to share my screen. Okay, is that okay now?
Yeah. We see it in presenters mode.
Okay, should I?
Usually there's this menu up on the in the top, way above. Yes, where even on the right. Move to the right.
Okay.
Configuración de visualización.
Yeah.
This one. Yes.
Okay. Now, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, okay, so let's introduce myself. Well, as you said, I'm Miguel Ángel Goriz. I'm research and development engineer in ITENE, which is a packaging and logistic research center here in Valencia, Spain. Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation to the event. It's a pleasure to be in the middle of this debate into the different solutions, mostly directed to the citizens, and which technologies can we develop to increase our recycling rates. I was thinking on sharing a first slide on the problematic and everything, but I guess we have talked a lot during these days on the challenges and the issues related to packaging and to recycling, etc. So I will go straight ahead to the project. First of all, I will give a general overview on the project, and then I will go directly to an alternative that we treat for improving the recycling rates and focus on the incentive in citizens. So Plastic Circle project is a Horizon 2020 project. The project was finished early this year, and we were a consortium of 20 partners around Europe. This project tried to attack, let's say, all the value chain in the waste management, passing through collection, transport, sorting, and recycling. We will focus today on this collection section, but I will just give a piece of each of what we did in each section. Okay, so well, we were a mix of research institute, companies, waste managers, municipalities, and in this collection part, especially, there were 3 pilots in the city of Utrecht in Netherlands, in Alba Iulia in Romania, and here in Valencia in Spain. Well, this project had a holistic overview in which there was a first step focused on the development of a smart container through the development of an identification model for the user, for the citizen, combined with other technologies as filling level, with the idea to convert usual containers into intelligent containers. This had a second part in transport. So the information provided from the filling level and other parameters in the container was used to optimize the routes and avoid those containers which were not full. So to improve the use of fuel and to reduce also times and distances. Well, all this project was based on the collection of packaging in the yellow container in Spain, and well, in other parts of Europe, it was adapted to dry container or plastic one. So the information in this collection and transport parts were all gathered in an IoT platform, which had a part for the waste manager and another for the citizen, in the way that the waste manager could control and gather the information from the collection and transport of the packaging, and in the other part, the citizen had some monitoring on the information that they were providing in the sense of the waste they produced. There was also a third part in improving the optical sorters with some film stabilizing studies, and also improving hardware and software in the optic machinery, together with our colleagues from Big Visa in Barcelona. And well, after that, there was a fourth part, more focused on recycling, but as today we are more on this collection and this incentive part, I will leave that apart. So in this first collection, we focus on smart containers and compensations to citizen or rewards. And to do so, we physically develop a label dispenser, which allows the citizen to stick a label to the bag, which would be afterwards characterized, and it would receive. Today we had I guess some debate between IPR schemes and so on. I won't go into that, just into maybe the technical approach. And this compensation, it was not by taxation, but just for eco points, let's say. So a similar approach as presented before. In which, well, with these eco points, the citizen had access to some public services or utilities, or could have some access to some maybe items like that the council or the waste manager could provide. So these two main developments, a smart container with this installation of labeling system, and then the rewards and compensation system for citizens. Okay, this is a bit how like the methodology that the project follow, and how the pilots afterwards in the 3 cities in Europe, we mentioned how these pilots were applied. So in the first stage, we had the resistation phase, in which there was a big communication campaign to the citizens, and this had to be adapted in both modes. One more digital one, more focused on young people, and some other more face-to-face one with some workshops and people that work around in the portal in which the pilots were set, in order to reach also all the people that maybe were not that related to technologies. In that sense, well, in this first stage, there were several workshops. There was a really hard work from the campaign. From the campaign perspective, the council, the waste managers, and local authorities were really involved in all these activities. And in this point, the citizen received a card, and RFID card, and also some keyring, which had in which this was was the tool, let's say, to identify when they go to the container. So in this part, you could approach like your card or your keyring to the module that it was attached to the container, and then a label was dispensed and attached to the bag. Then the bag was thrown to the container, and in a future pass, then it can be characterized. In this project, as it was in a pilot scale, let's say this characterization was done manually or semi-manual, but in a final phase of the project, our colleagues from Big Visa helped us to develop a solution to characterize this waste automatically based on artificial vision techniques, with the idea that, well, in this case, they already have a commercial device that can characterize the flow of a waste stream. So the idea was to use this device to characterize automatically the content of a bag. Okay, so what at the beginning could be a limitation, we try to convert this in a potential opportunity, making use of these artificial vision techniques and technologies that are rising up really recently. So, okay, so with that characterization, like the citizen is let's say compensated or rewarded by the quality of their waste. So there were several parameters: unwanted material, the quantity of organic matter that could be in the packaging bag, and so on. That depending on these parameters, you receive a certain score. And this kind of score, together with other options that the citizen had to participate in the project, as accessing social media challenges, making some surveys, or accessing to some webinars or trainings in recycling, sustainability, and some other subjects, you could gain these points that could be used, as I said, in some public services and some other applications. Okay, so well, as for the results on the project, let's say the parameter in which I will focus now is the quantity of impropers in the bag. We reduced like these impropers from a 21% to an 8%, more or less. And well, we saw in general, you can see in the graph on the left, that generally like the quantity of packaging increased. As for example on the PET and film, and the resultant waste fraction, which is the improper, decrease. Okay, this was analyzed for the pre-pilot and the post-pilot, and also compared with the behavior of other citizens which were not participating in the project. Okay, the overview of this project was also assessed from an LCA and LCC perspective. And the impact from introducing these technologies in the value chain were also assessed. In this collection part, we assess also let's say the weight of infrastructure, and comparing the impacts, including this type of technologies, is not really impactful on, let's say, on the whole impact in the value waste management of the waste management. And well, we also had some benefits both from this improvement of the quality of the waste, and also the optimization in the routes that I mentioned before, which lead to save on 20% more or less on transport, and also on the sorting, understanding that the quantity that will go to the light packaging plant in impropers will be lower, and also this will mean less quantities disposed in landfill or incineration. Okay, we've been mentioning also the money flow that we have in this kind of incentive systems. So before then, I'm sure my colleague panelists have explained better than me all this system, but just to resume some conclusions that our partners from Sintef in Norway did in this project, was that, well, main stakeholders impacted both by this kind of technologies are municipalities, waste managers, recyclers, for sure. That the investment of this kind of IoT devices can be compensated by this reduction in full consumption. This is for the waste manager. Also, in this project, we learned that in this kind of incentives help to improve quantities and also the quality of the waste collected, which can cause higher cost to the waste manager in terms of more quantities and to manage all this. But also this should be compensated by the remuneration by the PRO. Okay, in this way, also improving recycling rates implies reducing landfilling and incineration, which are in a rising tendency due to the recent legislation and all the directive messages from the European Commission. And also, as last conclusion in this chain, like improving the quality of these flows and let's say getting rid of some of the impropers affects to the recycler quality and their feedstocks, and also to their operational cost. Okay, so as main conclusions, let's say that investing on digitalization of collection, transport, and waste system is a must. Also make and involve citizens as part of the solution, like not the problem. And this will lead us to improve qualities and quantities of the recovered waste for future steps in the value chain, and also avoiding landfilling and incineration practices. With that, well, I leave here my contacts, all the companies that work in this project. Well, just let you know that here we are in Tene in Valencia. So if you want to visit us, know more about the project or other of our activities, you are more than welcome to contact me. Thanks so much again for the invitation.
Thanks, Miguel Angel. We definitely do want to visit you. Just to make it clear for me in my head, it's not a pay-as-you-throw project. You could call it a reward-as-you-sort project.
Yeah, so yeah, it's more pay as you. It wouldn't be as pay as you throw, more how you throw.
Yeah, perfect. There were some questions, but you answered them during the call. We are just in time for the break. And if anybody's interested, first of all, go to that website if you want to see. I saw a lot of videos and information on that website that people can see if they're interested in this topic. And we are on time for the break. We are taking a 12 minutes break, and we'll be back here at 11:15 Israel time, 10:15 European time. Please join us. Miguel Angel, thank you very much.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye. And we are back from the break. I hope you all are holding your coffee cups and are ready for the second half of this day. And we continue with Dr. Angel Collot, who is the Senior Manager for Environmental Affairs at Plastics Europe, which is the European Association of Plastic Manufacturers. Good morning, Angel. And we asked Angel to talk about the perspectives of industry, to what incentives are needed in order to increase recycling. We've heard from Israeli industry, but we also wanted the European perspective. So Angel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully it's going to work. Okay, so hopefully it's in full mode.
It's in full mode.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Angel Collot, Senior Manager on Circularity and Global Affairs at Plastics Europe.
Angel, would you be able to speak closer to the microphone, because we hear you quite softly?
Yeah. So I've got a problem here. Maybe I can speak louder.
Yes, that would work.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So just a few words on who we are as Plastics Europe. We are the voice of the plastics resin producers in Europe, with a membership of 100 companies covering 90% of all polymers produced in Europe. We are a pan-European organization, with offices in 5 regions of Europe, including the UK. And I'm speaking here from the EU offices, which are based in Brussels. We've established strong partnership with the value chain to accelerate solution-driven approaches to deliver safe, circular, and sustainable solutions. We're also publishing yearly up-to-date comprehensive industry data with our Plastics the Facts report. Some of you might know them. So what are we doing? So I will come first onto our commitments. In 2018, we developed a series of voluntary commitments. So here they are on the slide here. We pledged to increase our engagement inside and outside our industry, working with global organizations such as the World Plastic Council on the International Council of Chemical Associations. We're also working together with a network of plastics associations worldwide on a marine litter solutions project. At EU level, we pledge to accelerate innovation in the full life cycle of products. That will be allowing the industry to reach in 2040 100% reuse, recycling, and or recovery of all plastic packaging. So we have an intermediate target in 2030 to reach 60% reuse and recycling of all plastic packaging. And we're also continuing to develop our program to prevent the leakage of plastics into the environment. And we have 100% of our members who signed up to our voluntary program, which is called Operation Clean Sweep. So we are also working with the value chain, as I mentioned earlier, and we've established sectoral polymer specific commitments to increase reuse and recycling. And there's a list of some of the organizations here working on covering the polyolefins, polystyrene, and PVC value chain. Our members are also planning to invest more than 7 billion euros in chemical recycling in Europe by 2030. That is to complement mechanical recycling. And part of this investment will deliver some capacity already by 2025 with 1.2 million tons of recyclate. And it's estimated to reach 3.4 in 2030. I just want to check, can you hear me well? Because I think I've got background noise here. Hopefully it's okay. So,
yeah, it's okay.
Thank you. So we are working with the value chain on the European Commission. I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about some of the engagement we have. We are fully engaged in the Circular Plastic Alliance. which is the European Commission's value chain partnership to promote new voluntary actions to ensure that 10 million tons of recycled plastics are incorporated into new European products by 2025. This alliance was launched in December 2018 by the European Commission, and it involves nearly 300 stakeholders organizations along the plastic value chain. So the overall target is to reach at least 10 million tons of recycled plastic by 2025. So as mentioned in my previous slide, Plastic Europe plays a leading role in delivering on the overall target set by the Circular Plastic Alliance by planning to contribute with 1.2 million tons of recycled plastics produced through chemical recycling by 2025. So as you can see on the slide, the CPA is working on 5 thematic areas. It has selected a number of priority products in the packaging, automotive, building and construction, agriculture, and electronic sectors. It's looking at the legal, economic, and technical barriers to the uptake of recycled content. And it's just published a report in which it identifies the untapped potential for collection and sorting, but also investment needed to reach the target of 10 million tons. It's also setting up a monitoring system which will monitor the quantities of collected and sorted waste, recycling inputs and outputs, and converting inputs and outputs. So on design for recycling, the CPA is currently developing and revising existing guidelines on design, but it has also assessed the need for new or additional technical standards. So based on the CPA output, now the European Commission has issued a standardization request to the European Standards Organization, so the CEN and CEN-CENELEC. So that needs to be followed, and we can provide more input into that if needed. So we really believe that coordination with the value chain is key to progress on the circularity of plastic and increase plastic recycling. And that's why Plastic Europe and its members are fully engaged in the Circular Plastic Alliance. And we have provided input in all these work streams. So the CPA vision is that design for recycling, increased collection, and better sorting will provide more reliable feedstock streams to the recycler. And together with advancements in recycling technology, these will lead to quality recycled plastic, which is required by the market at a competitive price. So there are current barriers to increase recycling. So there is, for example, the quality needs to be adapted to the requirements of the second life application. There needs to be availability and security of supply, and there needs to be acceptance of recycled plastics versus virgin plastic. So I guess all activities that have been looked at as part of the CPA are in the circle, and we can see here on the slide that it needs to be linked to each other. So I'm going to move on now into what is Plastic's position on different legislative proposal. So starting first. Sorry, I've got one missing here. Okay, starting first with our global position. So we are supporting efforts at EU and international level to develop response options to address the plastic littering challenge, and we support convening an intergovernmental negotiating committee for a global agreement on plastics. So we, as plastic raw material producers, manufacturers, we agree that a global agreement for plastic should be legally binding with a mix of legally and non-legally, but voluntary elements such as legally binding country monitoring on reports and development of national action plans. But we're leaving some flexibilities for countries to develop their own legislation, which is fitted to their national needs. And we also support, as you've seen before, harmonization of technical standards and definition at global level. And we also now going back into the EU context. With some of you may be aware, but we've just announced a few days ago that our position on mandatory recycled content. So we support a mandatory EU recycled content target for plastic packaging in the revision of the EU Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive. And we, as a European plastics manufacturer, contribute to the recycling target by consistently supplying large amounts of high-quality recycled plastics. This should be derived for all waste materials through a technology-neutral approach that includes both mechanical and chemical recycling to provide this recycled content. So we also believe that final targets should be set collaboratively with the institution and the value chain, but it could be up to 30%. So that would be subject to certain unnecessary enabling conditions, which includes the EU harmonized policy and regulatory framework, and as well as a mass balance methodology, which is developed in the context of chemical recycling. I will now move into giving a few examples of what our members are doing in terms of recycling and in design for circularity. So you find a snapshot here of what our members are doing. There are examples in the development of new products in different sectors, such as building and construction, automotive, aeronautics, electronics, packaging, as well as investment of advanced recycling technologies for the production of plastic recycled content, which we use in consumer products. So you've got examples here that highlight that. So in summary, we conclude that collaboration and coordination with the value chain, the authorities, and other stakeholders is absolutely key in advancing the development of the circular economy and recycling. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. We had a question on your, which was not the topic of the presentation, but what is your opinion policy on plastic reuse?
So we support the circular economy. So we support preserving resources and using plastic products for as long as possible. And that's the reason why we also investing in plastic design.
Mm-hmm. So plastic design is also for reuse, not just for recycling and sorting.
Yeah.
Great. If there are any other questions, then of course you can reach us and we will forward the questions to Dr. Angel. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time and the presentation. And I see that Jack is with us, so we can move ahead to the next presentation, which is going to the municipal level. And we asked Jacques McKibben, he's the program coordinator at Zero Waste Cities, which is an NGO based in Brussels, to talk with us about cities with zero waste goals, especially related to plastic, but not only. So Jacques, good morning. Thanks for joining. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation to speak at this conference today. Let me just share my screen. Give me 1 second. I hope everyone can see this clearly now.
Yes, perfect.
Wonderful. So yeah, I am the Zero Waste Cities Program Coordinator at Zero Waste Europe. And today I've been invited to sort of speak about the work that we do at the local level to really help drive Europe's transition towards a zero waste future. But for us as the NGO, first and foremost, we are based here in Brussels. This is where I am at the moment. I'm actually from the UK originally, but the organization here based in Brussels. And because of this, we obviously use this position to, lobby the European Union to push for ambitious waste legislation and circular economy legislation, ranging from packaging, reuse targets to recycling. So not only, we have this sort of top-down approach, but my role, and importantly, we have a bottom-up approach where we help our network of, we have 32 members in 28 countries now across Europe. And these members work directly with local municipalities to help mentor, support them to implement effective and strong zero waste strategies at the local level. And that's my work here, and this is what I'll be speaking about later or throughout this session. But just to sort of quickly introduce what we mean by zero waste, it's the journey towards getting to zero. This is the most important thing. We're not speaking just about zero waste, but it's about this commitment to continuously improve, to reduce waste generation, and to create systems that simply don't generate waste in the first place. And this is much more of a decentralized approach, which puts decision-making in the hands of communities. It helps create jobs in more labor-intensive sort of sectors, recycling, reuse, rather than extremely expensive, high-tech sort of ways to treat waste, burning waste, or other methods. And zero-waste policies really help to identify where the waste is being generated. It makes it much more visual, and therefore you can understand, okay, this is where we're currently at, and therefore what do we need to do? What policies do we need to be effective in the future? So what is a zero-waste city? You may be asking yourself, and as I mentioned before, it's really this continuous effort to phase out waste. So we work with cities, some of Europe's best performers, who are recycling sort of 80% and above of their municipal solid waste. But also we work with those who are working towards those goals, who maybe simply recycling 20, 30, 40%, or have high levels of total waste generation. But what is the most important thing is that, okay, we commit to become zero waste city, and we're going to work towards achieving this with yearly improvements. And with this as the ultimate goal, simply creating and implementing local systems that, as I mentioned, do not burn or landfill waste and don't generate it in the first place. The cities program that we have here at Zero Waste Europe, so we actually work now with 445 municipalities across Europe who are, as I mentioned, engaged and being supported to develop their own zero waste strategies. And we do this, as I mentioned, via a network of local experts. And it's really my role to help coordinate and harmonize this and to build capacity and expertise. We also capture the best practices to say, okay, zero waste isn't a fanciful vision of the future. It's practical policies. It's a framework that can be tailored effectively to different contexts, urban, rural, high population, low populations. And then we sort of, we model and showcase these to our global audience as well. And in the past year or so, we've really led and formalized our work by creating the world's first zero waste city certification, which is much more robust, exciting framework for municipalities to follow and reward them for their good performance. And what we see is the most exciting thing, the certification, is actually a to-do list. We have a set criteria, and this provides the municipality with a direct framework to follow when they say, okay, we want to become zero waste, but what does this mean practically? So this is just some examples of what we do. The story of Salce is a case study that we use often online. In a different time, we used to run in-person workshops, hopefully, again, in the not too distant future, to sort of help municipalities really understand, get to grips with their local issues and co-create policies. And most recently, we have captured all this data and showcased it in the State of Zero Waste Municipalities report that's available on the Zero Waste Cities website. And there'll be yearly new editions of this with the latest data coming out every year. So this basic framework of a zero waste city, yes, it starts with curbside, which is horrible English. I should really change this slide, but it's a door to door, so close to the source of waste, businesses and households, putting out the separation of different waste streams. So the key waste streams, particularly for those of us living in the EU, but it's similar across Europe, of course, and the wider sort of MENA region is paper and cardboard, plastics, drinks containers, glass, residuals, and then the most important one, of course, is organic waste. If you separate this, then there are numerous benefits in terms of reducing the volume of waste that's sent for landfill incineration. If it's going to landfill, this organic waste will accumulate a huge amount of methane emissions, so that's critically important to avoid. Organics is also very easy to treat if you have composting systems set up locally in terms of home or community compost where there's access to garden waste, or more centralized in a sort of anaerobic digestion site. And as I mentioned sort of at the start, I think the framework that we always encourage, sorry, is to really look at the residual waste. So what's left, what's being sent, what's non-recyclable being sent for landfill or incineration. Because if you sort of analyze this and assess, okay, what's not being recycled, what's the most problematic issues, you can adopt your policies to, okay, we need to increase our awareness about actually this paper could be recycled, or you can say, okay, you know, we're not, you can optimize the collection rounds to save costs, municipality. And this data is also can be used to say to certain businesses or authorities, you know, you continue to place non-recyclable materials on the market, and we want you to change. Where possible, we encourage the implementation of economic incentives, and we often call these sort of pay-as-you-throw systems. So basically those households and businesses that generate the most waste pay more in their sort of local fees for waste management. And so this is done by having obviously a fixed fee for all citizens, but then having a variable part of the fee. So between, you know, 50, 60, 70% that's fixed, and the rest is variable depending on how much waste is generated. And then this can be done in high tech or sort of with radio frequency chips on bags or bins, which sort of goes to a central computing system and individualized for each household. Or like, for example, here in Brussels, technically we have a pay-as-you-throw system because households have to buy the bags that the waste go in, but it's, you know, very low tech and very easy, therefore maybe a lower impact. Critically important is to engage the local community here. With Zero Waste City has Zero Waste Advisory Board. It runs Zero Waste Family Challenges to help, you know, raise awareness about how to do zero waste more properly. It introduces a zero waste label for its local businesses and schools that are adopting these policies as well. So it really brings attention, it brings the community together, and really sort of, drives forward change as a collective. I think that's one of the most important policies to highlight here. Where possible, municipalities should be sort of encouraging waste prevention within this broader ecosystem of a city. So working with partners to set up packaging-free shops where people can bring containers to collect bulk food or liquid sort of cleaning items or various different things. Reusable nappies, particularly for kindergartens, is a hugely impactful policy because nappies often form a really sort of problematic part of the residual waste stream. Centers that host reuse and repair, sort of centers for bikes, electronics, loads of different items, furniture is key because you can utilize, well, often these are huge sort of weighty items of waste, but also you can really utilize the collective experience and skills within a local community. If you bring together electricians or mechanics, for example, to help with this. And of course, we often see deposit return schemes as one of the most impactful policies, where consumers are placed with a small fee on top of a plastic bottle or glass, different items, and therefore, you know, they're encouraged to return this as well. And most often at the moment in Europe, we see this with coffee cups or reusable sort of packaging for takeaway food as well. And then finally, the framework of a zero waste city to include is that a municipality or a city should be looking at what they can do internally. So, you know, introducing, for example, bans on single-use plastic items at public events and spaces is very common here at the moment. But if we're looking at public procurement, the tenders and services that a municipality runs, this is really a way to have a huge impact. Because, sort of money-wise, and also, as I mentioned before, how to increase awareness and impact with a broader ecosystem of stakeholders is key. This is just a very sort of easy graphic to show the benefits of what a zero waste city is. If you're having less waste to manage and you're sending less waste for disposal, there's less cost for a city, reduced fees for citizens, and obviously there's the environmental and the health and the climate change benefits there from simply producing less waste, from using less resources. But also the benefits we see, zero waste policies really help grow communities, to create local jobs where money sort of stays in the local community. It helps municipalities go above and beyond what's required in national and European Union laws. Yeah, it helps, as I mentioned, bring together communities to, you know, for example, many some municipalities that we see good practices include setting up in public procurement certain tenders that require the companies that win the tenders to hire a certain amount of their workers from perhaps socially disadvantaged backgrounds as well. So you're bringing in the social dynamic here, not only waste reduction and economic benefits. So in the sort of the 5 minutes that I have left, let me show you some successful examples, because this is all well and good, of course, but if it's not being applied practically well, then we're just sort of talking to ourselves. So yeah, let me just show you a couple of examples from different contexts about how this works. One of them, yeah, the hotspot for zero waste cities for us is in Europe, in Italy. And importantly, what we see with the zero cities here, we talk about here that the numbers are separate collection of the first bit. So this is, of all the municipal waste that's generated, what is separately collected for recycling. This is often in the direct competency of municipality, because recycling figures are therefore often taken away and it's confusing and longer term. So we focus a lot on separate collection, and then the rates are about a drop of 9 to 15% to the recycling figures. So in Italy, over 1,000 municipalities separately collecting 80% and above of the total municipal waste that's generated. So there's less than 20% is directly being sent for landfill or incineration, and over 100 are actually 90%. And this is done, as I mentioned, by following the framework that I outlined earlier. But it's not just about increasing recycling, it's also about reducing our total sort of waste footprint. And so these municipalities are also combining this with waste prevention programs to showcase how, you know, over 2,000 are really sort of showcasing that you can achieve per person per year below 100 kilograms of residual waste, and you'll see below 30 is even possible as well. So hugely successful numbers there. And this is just one example from a waste management company, Pontorina, which is responsible for 49 municipalities in the Treviso region, the northeastern part of Italy. And you'll see here on the left, it has one of the lowest costs because it's one of the most effective schemes. And of course, its recycling rate is extremely effective, and it's, you know, recycling 85% as it was in 2018. You compare that to the Italian average, it's 30% higher. So what you're seeing is you have high impact for low costs. So it's a win-win situation. 2008, I'm going to move on now to Slovenia as a country, is a good example. Slovenia sat mid-table in terms of performance recycling within the EU. 10 years later, it became one of the top two. In the EU, I think it's still second or perhaps third behind Austria and Germany now. And this has really been driven by the growth of Slovenian zero waste cities. There's some ambitious national legislation underpins this success. A network of zero waste cities here, and some of the figures you'll see is that what you have is the separate collection rate way above the EU average, but of course, combining this with the total, so this is total, not just municipal waste as well. So this is a much broader picture. Yeah. So in comparison to the EU average as well, and the ambitious goals set for the future. Slovenia is a real success example, but it hosts our first zero waste capital city in Ljubljana, obviously, and it showcases where this can be done in densely populated areas, or for example, in cities like Vrnica, which is much more rural as well. So the zero waste cities model can be successfully applied and tailored for different contexts. And yeah, these are just some figures from Ljubljana that shows the impact since the zero waste strategy really came into place earlier in the last decade, in terms of the volume of waste here on the right that's separately collected, which therefore has a dwindling impact on the volume of the residual waste that's been sent for landfill or incineration. Landfill here in the case of Ljubljana. And then I wanted to include this example because the past year we've really seen an increase in interest from German cities, traditionally those who are have closer relationships with high-tech incineration technologies, but zero waste is therefore, yeah, we're seeing as this attractive and successful because municipalities realize that the climate aspect of zero waste is crucially important, and both agendas in terms of our net zero and our zero waste strategies can be complementary to one another. Kiel in 2018 introduced its zero waste strategy, which was formalized, and in 2020 is now being implemented. And since then, we've had about 10 different cities, including Munich, Düsseldorf, most recently, commit to becoming a zero waste city. And I wanted to include this because it's our theory of change. What you need in each country where we work with is one municipality to take the lead, to become a front runner and say, okay, look, this is possible, it's achievable, look at the benefits it brings. And then others sort of follow in their path, and they really, it's okay, yes, this is doable, this is practical, you know, it's not just sort of some NGO talking about it, it's actually going to bring us several benefits for our community. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight this in Kiel. And then very finally, one specific example of a zero waste strategy is community composting. I mentioned this is the example from the region of Pontevedra in Galicia and northern Spain. And so what we mean here is community compost is where 10 to 20 households have access to a compost site. So they bring their own food, they use their food waste, they bring garden or green waste from local parks. And the system showed that there are some costs to set up the system, of course, for a community. But once you're sort of capturing above 40% of the total organic waste, and the costs go quite down rapidly until you get 75, and then it's sort of the reduction, the decrease slows a bit in the flat lines. And then just in comparison, in terms of dealing with waste, community composting or home composting is hugely much more cheaper than sending it for incineration. And so therefore, not only are you reducing, or you're saving costs, first and foremost, you're reducing hugely the environmental impact. As composting can then be given back to local farmers, or used in local parks, etc., or in people's homes and gardens as well. So to help regenerate the soil and to create soil nutrients, rich in nutrients, I should say. Sorry. So that's it to summarize. I'm probably slightly over time, and my apologies, but it's been great to chat, and I look forward to maybe answering some questions perhaps, and my email is there at the bottom left-hand side corner. So if you want to drop me a line, please do. And thank you again very much for the invitation to speak today, and best of luck with the rest of the conference, and hope to speak more with those listening. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Actually, you're not over time. Perfect time. We have a few minutes for questions. Well, the immediate questions, of course, are you working with any Israeli collaborators, cities, or NGOs? And if not, how can we join?
Great question. Yes, at the moment we're not, but we'd love to explore this further. So if there are, interested people listening, my email is just jack@zerowasteeurope.eu, and let's try to explore this. We often, we do the work through local partners because the day-to-day work it's harder from Brussels. So ideally we could help support municipalities through the help of local waste experts and NGOs. But I'd love to get the conversation going, because at the moment our current sort of boundaries end in Cyprus, in Greece, Bulgaria. So we'd love to extend that further.
Awesome. So Yuri, you can reach out to Jack offline or through us if you're interested. Second question is, have you seen an increase specifically in recycling? I guess the answer is yes, but through working towards zero waste goals, can we actually say that there is an increase in recycling activity when a city has these goals?
Yeah, so two important aspects here to consider. I think so. Recycling is a complex process, and it requires stakeholders, not just the municipality. It requires the market to be available, and obviously this has been challenged recently since COVID in terms of particularly the selling on recycled plastics and paper is a lower cost. So, but what municipalities can do, and the most important thing, is to separate the waste at home. So source separation of the recyclable materials, and then to ensure that as much of this is as higher quality and higher quantities as well. So if you collect organics separately, you really reduce the contamination and therefore increase the quality of what can be recycled. So municipalities, by implementing zero waste strategy, that sort of basic door-to-door separate collection of waste, supplemented with bring sort of centers or recycling centers where individuals can bring bulky items or hazardous items, that what you're doing is you're increasing the volume which can be sent for recycling, and then we work with municipalities to work with the recycling companies to help ensure there is a market available for these products as well.
Awesome. Last question, although there are a lot of questions in the chat, maybe you can later answer them in the chat, or we might organize another session with you. It's a broad question, but we don't have many opportunities to talk with someone with your perspective. Could you say what do cities need from national government in order to reach zero waste goals, or specifically increase recycling, or but let's talk about zero waste goals.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. Where to start, basically? So national governments should really set the framework for, as I mentioned, let's start with the source separation of the waste and the treatment of organics. I think national governments can set the tone in terms of reducing incineration capacity or landfill capacity, and therefore forcing the hand of municipalities to say, okay, either we're going to have to pay a lot, so increase the taxes on the fees of the gate fees, for example, or reduce the capacity, so they don't have a choice other than to introduce waste reduction policies. So that can also help. And then in terms of, we start to get into the realm of reuse and repair, and there is a lot in terms of deposit return schemes are most impactful at the national level, to help set like targets for the volume of reusable items placed on the market, to help provide standardized sort of classifications for reusable packaging is clear, because that helps businesses know what they need to do to become or to introduce reusable materials into the market, and ensure that they're, particularly when we're dealing with food, they need to be safe and sort of free from harmful chemicals. So that's critically important as well. And so there's a lot in terms of disincentivizing waste generation, absolutely, but then providing a framework for waste prevention to flourish, for municipalities to introduce or to be encouraged to provide economic, legal incentives for reuse businesses to be able to grow as well. And this, if a national government can set this, it really, really helps sort of set the framework for it, allows others to flourish, to grow, and to accelerate the progress towards zero waste.
Awesome. Well, that's about the time that we had. Thanks so much, Jack, for taking all these questions. Again, if you want to answer if you still have time, you want to answer some of the questions in the chat, that would be great. But otherwise, we'll forward the question to you. And we move ahead to our last presentation from FOSPlus. We heard about, we were looking forward to this presentation since the morning, and we have our Lou from, she's the Public and Regulatory Affairs Manager at FOSPlus, which is Belgium's organization leading the transition to the circular economy in packaging. Aurelia, good morning. And the floor is yours if you want to share a screen.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Let me share my screen indeed. This should work. Are you guys seeing this?
Yes, we do.
Great. I do happen to have neighbors who decide to do works on their roof today unexpectedly. So if you hear any works on the background, I apologize in advance. If you can't hear me, just give me a sign. So hi, yeah, I'm Aurelia. I'm in charge of public affairs at FOSPlus. FOSPlus is in charge of household packaging waste. We're in an EPR, so Extended Producer Responsibility Scheme, or a packaging recovery organization. Just to give you a bit of context, Belgium is a country of 11 million inhabitants. We're a pretty small country. FOSPlus is the only player when it comes to household packaging waste. When it comes to commercial and industrial packaging waste, we have another entity called Valipack that takes care of that. We're an organization that counts almost 5,000 members, so companies that put packaged products on the market, and they pay a fee to us to take care of the waste stage of their packaging, which is a legal obligation. We have interregional packaging commission that oversees our activities, that provides an accreditation every 5 years, that really sets the terms and the framework of our activities. And we obviously have legal targets to reach on different materials when it comes to recycling. We have 36 intercommunal organizations in Belgium. So our municipalities, our cities and villages are organized in intercommunals. There's 36 of them, and we're in direct contractual relation with them. We agree to the terms or the scenario according to which certain flows or materials are collected, and we reimburse them the full cost of these activities. Sometimes they have their own services that do that. Sometimes they outsource this to a private operator. If it's a private operator, it's done according to a public tendering process, and we directly pay the invoice for the packaging collection. We've also received mandates from the intercommunal organizations to contract sorters. So we're in direct contractual relation with sorting facilities of our collections, and we're also in direct contracting relation with recyclers, which means that we can choose which recyclers our flows go to. And that means that 100% of our materials stay within the European Union, and 80% of our materials are actually recycled within Belgium. So this is a very short overview of how the system works, but just to recap in terms of what the building blocks are of our system, we have uniform collection scenarios. That means that throughout Belgium, the different streams are collected the same. It's not a legal obligation that's been set from above. It's basically a financial incentive. We reimburse full costs of your collection if you do it according to a certain scenario. Should you want to step away from that scenario, that's a choice you can have. You will be reimbursed reference costs, which are based on a 5-year average of the costs over the entire country of that collection. And usually, if you step away from the scenario that we propose, you're looking at a more expensive system. And so typically you'll have to top it up yourself. So ideally, you have basically a financial incentive to choose for our system because that gives you 100% coverage of your costs. This allows us, because we have this uniform collection scenario and sorting rules are the same throughout the country, it also means that we have a very continuous similar flow that we send to different sorting centers that have the same obligation. So they then separate the streams when it comes to lightweight packaging into 14 different fractions at a very high quality level. And these are things that we can establish because we have contracting power. We can set the terms to how sorting happens. And again, because the flow is very similar, because the citizens do a very good job at sorting at the source, sorting, post-sorting then in a sorting center happens at a very high quality level, which then allows us to contract recyclers in a very advantageous way because we have high quality material coming out. So we control also the data flows. We have a very detailed declaration system, which means that we have a very detailed view of what's placed on the market in Belgium. And then we have basically real-time weighing bridges when it comes to collection and also when it comes to what comes out of our sorting center. So we have a very granular view of everything that happens throughout the chain of a packaging life. And then this, actually this data allows us to be very granular also in determining what fees are attributed to each of these materials. And so finally, we have control over the material flows, and it's what I was saying earlier. We can contract recyclers. We know where the materials go, and we can also co-decide on what happens to them at that recycling stage. So we have a 3-pillar strategy. First of all, we want to offer a recycling solution for all household packaging waste that's placed on the market in Belgium. It's actually a pledge from the industry by 2025. We also want to achieve or to collect more tons and to achieve a higher recycling rate while using efficient systems. It's a difficult balance to keep. It's easier to collect more tons, but you're likely to have lower quality of your collection, and that means you'll achieve a lower recycling rate. it's easy to have a very specific flow on which you achieve a high recycling rate, but you'll collect fewer tons. So there's always a delicate balance to try to keep there. And then finally, digitalization is a very important aspect of what we do now. Again, we have full control of the data flows, and this allows us to be incredibly specific when it comes to attributing the costs to a material flow. We basically have 6% overhead. The rest is all directly attributable to each different packaging flow that we collect, sort, and recycle. So again, we have a uniform recycling scenario. We have 3 different flows. One is glass that works through bring bank systems where it's separated according to colored or clear glass. We have door-to-door collection of paper and cardboard, and we have door-to-door collection of what we call PMD, that stands for plastic household packaging, metal household packaging, and drink cartons or beverage cartons. And as you can see on the picture, these are collected in a transparent blue bag. So it's known as the blue bag in Belgium. It's transparent. Why? Because the operator then has the opportunity to visually check, has this been sorted correctly? And if there's very clear sorting errors, a sticker is put on there saying there's an error in your sorting, and the citizen that put it out has to resort it. So that's also one of the reasons why we get a very high quality sorting at the source from our citizens. It's that capacity from the operator to do a direct check before actually collecting. So if we look at the objectives that are set in Belgium, you probably have an idea of what's been decided at a European level in the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive. In Belgium, the objectives that were already set at a European level for 2030 have all already been surpassed for 2020, with the exception of plastics. Plastics, we had a 50% recycling obligation for 2020. That's the target for 2025 in Europe. In 2023, so 2 years from now, we'll have to attain 65% of plastic recycling, where Europe asks for 55% by 2030. So Belgium basically tries to be way ahead of the curve and overly ambitious basically on setting these targets. We're looking at a 2030 target for plastics of 70%. So this is gigantic, knowing that, 4-5 years ago, we were in the 30s, 35% recycling of plastics. And one of the reasons was that we were only collecting bottles and flasks. So we were doing very high collection rates on that, but we weren't looking further. And with these targets, it means there's a massive boost that needs to happen when it comes to plastic recycling. So we started a 2-pillar approach on this. One of them is to extend the sorting at home. And so that means going further than just plastic flasks and bottles, but extending to all plastic packaging. And the other one is to capture more out-of-home packaging. And that's always, some of the most difficult places, basically outside of home. It's harder to capture a recyclable packaging material. Just to give you an idea of size, what's collected inside the homes, or what's generated in terms of packaging waste inside homes, is about 90% of the total packaging waste generated. 10% is out of home. So it's not on those out of home targets or ambitions that we're going to reach the biggest volumes. But since we need to attain incredibly high targets like 65% by 2023, those few percentages are what is going to get us over that target. So it's one of the 2 pillars. Between those 2 pillars, we have what we call bridging the gap, and it's basically increasing the recyclability of packaging. We work on design for recycling together with our member companies to make sure that what they put on the market fits in one of our collection, sorting, and recycling scenarios. And another way of pushing that is eco-modulation. We work on an activity and material-based costing system. Again, with that data flow that I mentioned earlier, we can be very detailed in figuring out how much your material, specifically your packaging, costs to recycle. And that means that there's a wide difference in how much you will pay to put a PET tray on the market or a PET clear bottle on the market, because it just doesn't cost the same to collect, sort, and recycle. And the same way you'll have a major difference between a PE foil or a PS packaging. These are all modulated quite granularly, and that means that automatically that creates a financial push towards recyclable and most easy to recycle materials. So this new blue bag basically comes down to increasing by 50% the collection of PMD, so plastics, metals, and beverage cartons. It's going from 15 kilos per inhabitant per year to 23, so +8. So again, we've extended from plastic flasks and bottles to nearly all plastic household packaging, from 160 kilotons to over 250 kilotons per year collected. And we've done this as a phased rollout from starting 2019 to the end of this year. And it's allowed us already to reach that 50% target that we had for 2020. We went to 51% last year. So when you extend your collection, there's the entire chain behind it that also needs to be organized. So we started by extending the collection, then working with the sorting centers that we had. There was 10 or 11 of them. Some of them became transition centers, so they started sorting out a few more fractions, but we definitely needed new infrastructure, state of the art, to properly sort out 14 different fractions into high level materials. And so there's 3 of them that are already in activity at this point, and 2 last ones that are under construction. And then finally, there's the recycling aspect, because we have a lack of recycling capacity. And there's also an ambition in Belgium to create a recycling hub. We basically offered 9-year contracts to recyclers for a number of fractions, and forced them, or created strong incentives for them to build infrastructure in Belgium that needed to have a larger capacity than what we were offering. At this point, we have a bottle-to-bottle PET recycling facility that is being built for the end of 2022. It will do 100% bottle-to-bottle recycling with a majority of our PET bottles. We have a mixed polyolefin line that's been created. We have a PE foil to PE foil recycler, which I think is a unique one. It's post-consumer PE foil. And we should have PET tray recycling and HDPE recycler on the market soon. So 5 new recycling centers to be set up. And when the last 2 will be contracted, we're looking at an almost 1 billion euro investment into the local circular economy in Belgium. So the other pillar was the out-of-home collection. You have 3 different kinds of environments when you're looking at out-of-home. You have a closed environment, like basically at the office. In Belgium, what determines whether it's household waste or industrial waste is the type of packaging. It's not the case everywhere. Sometimes it's where the packaging waste is generated. But so in Belgium, if you drink a can of Coke and you do that at work, it's considered still household packaging. So it's collected in the blue bag at work. This is the easiest to influence. It's a closed environment. It's easiest to kind of copy what you already do at home. Then you have your semi-closed environments where you're looking at festivals, for instance, which is already slightly harder, but you can definitely set up the needed infrastructure to sort and recycle and collect whatever is generated, but it's not high tonnages. It does offer a certain visibility. And then our biggest challenge is on the go in open environments. We have a legal obligation to increase what's collected out of home, almost double over a number of years. So we started in 2018 collecting 14 kilotons of PMD, so plastics, metals, beverage cartons out of home. And we need to reach 26 kilotons by I can't see the bottom of my presentation, 2023. And so it's a structural increase, right? So 14 kilotons in 2018, we reached 16 in 2019. That means we still have to do 16 plus another 3 in 2020, etc. At this point, we're hitting the milestones, but it's going to be a tough target to go for the 26 kilotons. So our results in 2020, we basically collected nearly all glass packaging waste and paper cardboard packaging waste that was placed on the market in Belgium. The PMD is still at nearly 16 kilos because it's been a gradual rollout, both on the collection side as on the sorting side. We're not yet at that 23 kilos per inhabitant per year, but we're expecting to see a large boost starting this year because all of Belgium is now in the new collection system since October. And we'll have all of those new sorting centers set up normally beginning of next year. So that boost should be palpable even more starting next year. So finally, we have a high performing system, and it's because we collaborate well with the different partners, both public and private. We work very closely with our Environment Ministry or the Interregional Packaging Commission to make sure that there's consensus in the approach that we have, and it's allowed us to go towards a very uniform system. We've also had a very clear and sequenced approach to extending our collection, which has been an enormous operational work to get those sorting centers and recycling facility going, but it's there or it's almost achieved. And I think especially when it comes to out-of-home collection, we have a lot of challenges ahead that we're developing based on a system that's proved its worth already. So without overhauling a system, but building on the existing, basically. And that's what I had to say about FOSBUS.
Wonderful. Thanks, Aurelia. This has been fascinating. I think your neighbors were also on the webinar because they haven't been doing any construction work during.
Oh, great. You didn't hear anything. I thought my neighbors as in Holland for FOSBUS or something. But yes, no, my actual neighbors have been reasonably quiet, thank God.
They have. One question that we have from Ministry of Economy, do you have the same sanctions for not collecting enough as for not recycling enough? Is that the same fee, same sanction?
So sanctions, no. So there's the system that we have in place is we contract intercommunals that have an obligation anyway to collect. Then normally it's every 2 weeks. In some places it's every week to collect, the PMD fraction or the paper cardboard fraction. And then where we do have sanctions is on the quality that comes in. So if some of the quality is really bad and it can't be recycled or it can't be sorted properly, you'll have a malus, so a penalty. And if you structurally do well, you'll have a bonus on the flow that comes in. But so we don't. There's no like minimum tonnage that needs to be collected, but we definitely verify that the collection happens and that, again, there's a clear structural a framework, about the frequency of collection and the fact that it needs to cover the entire country, basically.
Yeah, so the ministry is refining their question to ask if the sanctions are on you do you have sanctions on you by the government, by the Belgian government?
On us by the government?
Yes.
So potentially yes, but so far we've managed to avoid them because we've reached targets. And
is it the same for not recycling enough and not collecting enough?
No, so it would be for not recycling enough. Okay. The collection is, we pay for it, but it is the responsibility of the municipalities. So the actual not recycling enough would be a sanction that we could get, yes. Great.
You mentioned that there is a €1 billion investment expected in the next few years. Who's putting it?
Yeah, so this is like a contract value, right? Mm-hmm. So you're looking at completely, changing the collection system, 5 new sorting centers where, it's 250 kilotons of material that needs to be sorted in these sorting centers. So minimum 50 kiloton per sorting center, and these recycling facilities. And like I said, we've been able to offer 9-year contracts. So you're looking at that flow being sorted over 9 years, at that flow being recycled over 9 years. And so that overall contractual value amounts to nearly €1 billion.
Got it. Then did you say that you actually have polymer specific recyclers? So you have a recycler that's expected to just do polyethylene films, and you have a recycler that's supposed to do PET trays?
Yeah.
And then they specialize on the specific polymer.
Yeah, so we separate our basically the lightweight collection into 14 fractions. 10 of them are plastics. And so we have PET clear bottles, PET blue bottles, PET colored but transparent bottles, and then PET trays, etc. And so there's 10 different fractions that all get separated and then go to their separate recycler. And just to go back to your previous question about the 1 billion, who pays for it? So we pay the sorting centers by ton that's sorted, right? And we pay the recyclers by ton that's been recycled. So essentially we pay for it. It's a contract,
yeah.
But we're not direct investors. It's not like it's our companies. We're not what we call vertically integrating. We're not buying them, but we are under contract with them. And so the contract value is
yeah, sure, that was a question, who pays the capex, but that's the
in the end it's us, but without actually being owners. So it's the producers, yes, to make sure that their stuff is recycled, but we don't become owners all the same.
Understood. We are out of time, although this is a joy. Thanks so much, Aurelia, for this presentation and taking the questions.
Thanks for having me.
If there are any further questions, we'll be happy to further to Aurelia offline. So thanks for your time. This actually concludes this 4th day of the webinar and concludes the 4 days of webinar. So I hope you have been with us for the 4 days. I've been enjoyed. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the guys behind the scene who made this all happen smoothly. That's Xenia Mishin and Cindy Milchberg. Thanks. Also, there's been a lot of effort behind the scenes to make this work and work smoothly. And I thank you for your help. Thanks everybody for participating. If you have further questions, feel free to reach out to any of us offline. Have a great end of the day.